What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NFL Weekly Preview right here on RotoGrinders. I'm Justin Carlucci alongside TJ Laessig. Another wacky week of NFL football is behind us. TJ, how's it going? The Birds got a gritty win. How do you feel about that Eagles win over the Niners?
Feeling good on this Monday morning. I mean, Philadelphia Eagles sitting on top of the NFC at 1-2-1. It's just a mess of a division, but they're just going to continue to string us along, I guess, here. That game last night was certainly not the smoothest game to watch, but got it done in the end. So I was happy to see the Eagles get a victory there. And as far as DFS goes, very, very high-scoring week. I mean, we had a feeling that would be the case going into the week, did a breakdown of all the totals that we had over 50, and a lot of them went over those totals and had some shootouts on our hands. So was a great week for tournaments. I think the Cowboys-Browns game was really the one that shot out and won people some GPPs with those game stacks.
For sure. Odell Beckham going off. Cleveland just laying the hammer down. Dallas keeps falling into this favorable Dak Prescott throwing the ball 9,000 times game script every week. Here we are. We'll get into some injuries momentarily. There were some big ones. I was watching some of the game last night, chilling at home, through DiGiorno and having a couple drinks with my girlfriend. Her sister was over too, and it's funny because she's like, "What does the one mean? What is 0-2 and 1?" I'm like, well, the Eagles actually tied last week. She's like, oh, that happens in football? I was like, it happens to the Eagles.
Only when the Eagles play the Bengals is there a tie in football, apparently.
But here we are, first place Eagles, right? Crazy. So they have plenty of time to get it together and move forward here. We'll talk about the Eagles more a little bit later. Eagles-Niners game, we have some takeaways from that. But obviously some huge injuries. Nick Chubb going to miss some time. Looks like he's going to miss over a month, right? So Kareem Hunt getting some more action. Here we go. More committees. We just talked about this, TJ, how you would think an injury would give more people a Mike Davis situation, right? Mike Davis stepped up and is kind of the bell cow McCaffrey. But no, Ernest Johnson saw 17 snaps for the Browns. Dontrell Hilliard had 15 snaps. Kareem Hunt actually had less snaps this week than 2 other weeks when Nick Chubb was healthy. So obviously Kareem Hunt's a huge playmaker. He's going to be on the field more, you would think. But it's just the way the NFL is anymore, right? So we're going to see more people on Kareem Hunt, but still some other guys here are getting some carries. And tie in with that the Austin Eckler news too. Brutal, for the Chargers. But Justin Jackson saw some snaps. So what's going over there with the Chargers, CJ?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer, right? We've been talking for the first couple of weeks of the season here now how we're just lacking those bell cow running backs that are going to be on the field. And you have 2 significant injuries that happen here. And rather than guys like Kareem Hunt and Joshua Kelly taking over and becoming that workhorse, instead, it seems like those snaps have just been split to other guys in the backfield. So looking at the Chargers, you've got Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson in a 60-40 split after Eckler goes down early in the game. So they seem pretty content to stick to a committee. I mean, obviously only a 1-game sample. Maybe they weren't prepared for it. And, of course, there's a chance that they decide to change in the future and we'll want to keep an eye on it. But it doesn't seem like there is an immediate option that opens up that screams value. And same thing on the Cleveland side. I mean, I'll be honest, I said before the show, I don't even know who Ernest Johnson is. I've never heard of him before, and he took 13 carries for 95 yards. So you would have thought that Kareem Hunt would become the workhorse there. Doesn't seem like that's likely to be the case. So, I mean, this really seems like a spot where we lost 2 super relevant fantasy running backs, and we're not going to get a ton to backfill that for the next couple of weeks here when those guys are out.
Check out RotoGrinders, guys. Our premium packages are awesome. We have every sport covered. Our NFL team's great. Podcasts, live shows, before a lot of showdown slates and things like that. Premium usage app, which is great. A lot of info on one screen. I mean, where you're able to check out targets, market share, air yards, A dots, how many snaps people played right here at RotoGrinders. I mean, don't hunt the web and make your research harder and longer than it is. So a lot of information right here. We're able to check out how many snaps did Kareem Hunt play? What did Josh Kelly do? So easily accessible, and really that's what you need. But yeah, Chargers had that pick six. I know I want to talk about that game real quick. And then Tom Brady, man, wasn't on my radar. That's my bad. But he lit it up. No Chris Godwin, no problem. O.J. Howard, another injury. Looks like he's done for the year. So just so many tough breaks across the league, whether it's lack of preseason, lack of an offseason, lack of nutrition. It's pretty terrible, TJ. It's sad to see all the disruptions. Of course, you have the COVID breakout with my Titans, who are finally 3-0 for the first time since before I could buy a beer legally. And of course, they're dealing with COVID and no positive test today, which means maybe they'll play against the Bills. And we'll bring up that game a little bit, and we'll talk about Josh Allen. But yeah, Tampa Bay and the Chargers. Besides the injury takeaways, what are your thoughts from that one?
Yeah, I think that was a game that shot out a little bit more than at least I personally was expecting. But there he is, Tom Brady. What did he throw for 5 touchdowns, I think?
Yeah.
And obviously Fournette was ruled out, and so Ronald Jones became an option and ended up having a pretty good game here. Let's see, he played 64% of the snaps, saw himself 10 targets, which is pretty promising. Actually led the team in targets. Mike Evans had 9. And then in kind of typical Brady fashion, I mean, he spread the ball out pretty well. Scotty Miller saw 7 targets. O.J. Howard 6. As you mentioned, he's now going to be out as well. But, I mean, Gronk is – I think it's pretty official that Gronk is no more. I mean, if it's a game where Brady's throwing 5 touchdowns and Gronk ends it with 1 catch, not that we've ever been looking to him, but I think this can officially kind of put that to rest. We'll see if the O.J. Howard being out impacts that in any way, but he's not somebody that I'm going to personally be interested in too much. And but yeah, I mean, Ronald Jones, I thought had a very nice game. Thought he was a good play coming in once the injury news came out. But I'm not typically a Ronald Jones guy, but if he's going to see that much work in the passing game, something to keep an eye on.
Which is interesting because when he came out, literally they were like, this guy can't catch, like in camp of his rookie year. Like, we can't play him because he has no hands, right? So the fact that he's on the field more. Keyshawn Vaughn caught a touchdown, barely played, but that's a guy who I'm thinking if they don't like what they see out of Rojo moving forward, maybe Keyshawn Vaughn, maybe next year, maybe kind of a late dynasty stash or something like that. But yeah, good points. And we won't spend a lot of time here. Tampa Bay is on Thursday Night Football with the Bears. So we'll have you'll have some showdown content on RotoGrinders later this week. And the Chargers are taking on the Saints next Monday night as well. So neither of those teams are on the main slate, which is generally what we try to cover here. And for time purposes, we'll just try to stick to the main slate. However, a huge game, which a lot of people stacked, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was over 20% owned on DK GPPs. And if I knew that, I would have auto-faded him. I did not see that coming. But was Seattle and Miami. Seattle's the team who will be playing on Sunday Night Football against the Vikings. Another game which we need to touch on was Vikings and the Texans. But, Miami and Seattle, high Vegas total. A lot of people, like a lot of guys in this game. Tyler Lockett, not great. DK Metcalf, okay. Chris Carson scored, got hurt, came back. Chris Carson gets hurt every week. I get suckered into playing Chris Carson all the time. Carlos Hyde was ruled out before the game. Just wasn't like the fantasy producing game that everybody was flocking to, right? For cash games, I get it, but 25% Fitzpatrick was in some GPPs I was in. That's just crazy. Devontae Parker got hurt and came back and had a pretty good game. You'll have these games where the points will be there and just the fantasy production just isn't. And when these guys are priced up because they're having crazy years, they're not always going to meet value in all these games, right? So that wasn't the right game stack for a lot of people. That was not the answer. So, what are your thoughts? Seattle, Miami, and then moving forward into next week, and we talked about Miami will be taking on the 49ers.
Yep. Yeah, a bit of a downer game, I would say, relative to what we've become used to with Seattle. Metcalf and Lockett seeing only 5 and 4 targets, respectively. A little bit lighter than we've become used to. Russ was kind of spreading the ball around a bit. 7 targets to Greg Olsen, 4 to David Moore, Chris Carson with 4 as well. A couple of the other random tight ends, Will Dissly getting his 2 targets. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to overreact too much to that negatively. Like you said, I believe Seattle's not on the main slate this week, but maybe that makes them a nice target for week 6 if people kind of have forgotten about them after they failed a bit as the chalk plays. And then, yeah, on the Miami side of it, I was quite surprised to see how heavy of an ownership Ryan Fitzpatrick came in. He started getting a lot of talk toward the end of the week, so I think that kind of jumped that up. But, yeah, Devontae Parker, 12 targets. Isaiah Ford, 9 targets. Stood out to me a bit. Only caught 4 balls, though, so didn't really turn it into much from a production standpoint. The Miami team's a little bit of a tricky one. It's mostly going to be Parker for me. Seemed like Gesicki for a while. I was excited about him, but that stepped back a bit. He only saw 3 targets this week.
Yeah, and he had that
not what you want to see.
He had that one outlier week where they were playing super garbage time. He had like 5 targets on the last drive or something.
Yeah.
If you kind of take week 2 out where you saw 11, you saw 5 week 1, 3 week 3, and 4 last week. I think he only caught 1 ball this week too, and that's just not gonna cut it for me to want to roster someone, right? That's tough.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, especially this week, they're playing on the road against San Francisco. San Francisco looking like an 8-point home favorite right now. I think from the Miami side of the ball, that's likely to be a fade for me. Not really looking to target that San Francisco defense too heavily, but on the San Fran side of the ball, I think that Jerick McKinnon is definitely worth talking about and worth considering. Obviously watched him last night against the Eagles. Just from watching the game, it looked like he was out there all the time, and then when you go back and look at the actual numbers, he certainly was. He played 92% of the snaps there. So, and it's just a talented running back and has had, a ton of success in the past, 8 targets in the passing game. So I think McKinnon is somebody that I'm definitely going to have some interest in coming into this week. He's 5,800 on DraftKings, which is a pretty decent price in my view.
Oh, yeah.
So he's somebody that I imagine will kind of come together as some chalk, although there are a couple running backs in that like 5,800 to 6,800 price range that I think are all pretty viable.
I like the idea of pairing him with the Niners defense in some way, shape, or form, to having some exposure like that. I mean, listen, Miami's traveling across the country. They're Niners are the 7th most expensive defense on DK. I'm with that. I like that. I mean, we know Fitzpatrick. Everybody loves him. I love him. We all love him. But he's turnover prone. He'll stare down the guy who's going to throw the ball to. He'll try to do too much and lose the ball sometimes. Going to the Bay on the road. I like that.
I love that play. And then obviously, I mean, George Kittle is just a beast out there. I mean, that guy does it all. It felt like they were really going out of their way to do creative things to get him the ball. I mean, 15 targets, caught all 15 of them.
Monster.
Goes for 183 yards and a touchdown.
Monster.
43 DraftKings points. I mean, I think that it's got to be a week where you need to consider ways to try and find a way to pay up at tight end and get Kittle into some lineups because he's a monster.
48% of their air yard market share on Sunday Night Football. We'll see what are they going to do at quarterback? Are we going to see CJ, or are they going to go back to the well here? What are we going to see from the Niners? And what do you think, upside wise? We don't talk a ton of strategy on the show, but can you play Kittle and McKinnon together in certain scenarios? Is that possible? I mean, that's not something that like I like doing unless I'm gonna play the quarterback,
Agreed.
But
Yeah, that's my thought too. I mean, I would because whether it's CJ Beathard or Mullins, I mean, I'm likely not going to have much interest in playing the quarterback and also not interested in much of a game stack here. So I would probably try to play one of Kittle or McKinnon in GPP lineups versus playing them together. Yeah, just because, like you said, unless you could play one of those quarterbacks, but I don't know. It seems like maybe you don't need to.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. I'm with you. One or the other is probably a good call to have exposure to. Just to kind of piggyback off of the other team in that game, your Eagles, gritty win, some would call it. Ugly win, a win is a win. Zach Ertz, 9 targets, didn't do much with it. 4 catches for 9 entire yards. He's a guy who, they're going to have a tough test with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's coming in, haven't played in a while, but they avoided the coronavirus. So they had a ton of time to get ready for the Eagles. I don't know. How does that make you feel? I'm just seeing, Ertz at 5,700. It could be interesting. And I'm thinking on the flip side of the ball, I don't hate the idea of going to Roethlisberger. We talked about all these quarterbacks with rushing upside is kind of the guys you want this year. And I'm looking at Roethlisberger on DK at 6,600, and literally every guy that's ahead of him has rushing upside. Lamar's at 79, Mahomes 77, your future MVP Josh Allen right there, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, and Deshaun Watson, who we'll get to momentarily, all have rushing upside, rushing TD upside. And then there's Ben, who I guess is kind of appropriately priced on this slate. Had a ton of time to prepare. The Eagles coming back to PA, gonna play in Pittsburgh. I don't hate the idea of looking at some Steelers this week. I think that could be a very interesting game, and I think the Birds are gonna have their handful, man. I really do.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I mean, obviously I have to take my personal bias out of this, and I don't know that there's a single Eagle that I'd really want to play against the Pittsburgh defense. I mean, they're pretty solid all around from a D perspective. Eagles are 7-point underdogs. I'd much prefer the Pittsburgh side of the ball here. Obviously, They didn't play this week, so I'm not exactly sure on the status of Deontay Johnson after he was injured the last time out.
Right.
I haven't looked at an update there, but I imagine if he is not playing, then we'll certainly want to look at Juju, and that would give him a bump there. If he is playing, I still think Juju is well in play, and Deontay would be in play there as well. And then, of course, you have James Conner, I think, could set up nicely. He probably won't get a ton of buzz. I imagine that he'll be more of like the GPP pivot off of people like the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Mike Davis, the McKinnon. But I think Connor's somebody that we should probably consider as well. And, yeah, Ben, I think 6,600 is a nice price there. I think you'll probably get some pretty reasonable ownership on him. Just doing a quick glance, I feel like a lot of people will either pay up at quarterback or maybe go all the way down to Matt Ryan at 6,100.
Yeah.
I think that'll probably be the two popular routes, which leaves Ben in that sweet spot that may go overlooked.
For sure. And, yeah, checking up on Deontay Johnson's status is going to be pretty integral. He had a lot of the market share, air yards, and targets. He was the guy first couple of weeks. We'll see what his status is. But even week 3, I mean, Ben really spread the ball around. 21% of the air yard went to Deontay, 21% to James Washington, 13% to Juju. Juju really hasn't had a ton of the air yard share this year yet, right? It's strange. I mean, maybe I haven't physically watched a lot of Pittsburgh games yet. Maybe he's getting more coverage shaded to his side. I don't know. Which brings me to, have you heard anything on Darius Slay? We saw he had a knee problem last night, and if he's out, that's a huge blow to the Eagles.
Yeah, I have not heard anything one way or the other, but agreed. I mean, that would be a huge blow, and really even The more you're saying it, the more I think that some Steelers stacks are definitely going to be in the mix here, and something that you want to take a look at.
Yeah, so definitely
Yeah.
monitor that, a couple of those situations throughout the week. And yeah, I think some of those guys definitely have to be in play as well. Especially if Deontay Johnson doesn't play. I mean, he's just been a hog through the air. So, that ball's going to go up somewhere, whether it's Juju or if you're thinking more, contrarian, maybe you look at a James Washington or something like that. But yeah, and let's move backwards and forwards at the same time here and talk about the Texans, who were a very popular stack this past weekend and let a lot of people down. The 0-4 Houston Texans, miserable, absolutely miserable. Brandon Cooks ran a lot of routes, played a lot of snaps, had a few targets. Goose egg, just horrible.
I fell into the Brandon Cooks trap personally on DraftKings. Played him in my main cash lineup. Nice goose egg there. I don't know what's going on with this Texans team right now. They haven't seemed to be getting anything going. It seems like they want to run the ball, but they're not doing it very well. And as a result of that, there's just not a lot of production happening. And now they come into a spot here where they're going to be home against Jacksonville, who Joe Mixon just ate alive last week. And, I'd love to be like, oh, here's the David Johnson spot, but it's a little scary. I think that you certainly have to consider him. He's down to 5,200, which is a pretty cheap price. I'm looking at snap data right now, and I'm not sure it's making sense because it says he played 38% of the snaps last week, but I'm not giving any snaps to anyone else. Maybe some faulty data that I'm looking at the moment, but I believe David Johnson is playing the majority of the snaps and has been. So I think that you can look to him at home in this matchup against the Jaguars, and maybe it's time to go back to the Brandon Cooks well, because nobody's going to play him this week after everyone plays him and he gets a 0. He's now down to 4,100. So if he was the chalk play this week and he gets just as good of a matchup, if not a better matchup, and has gone down in price, but nobody's going to want to play him, I think that that's an interesting move for tournaments, just because, like you said, he was on the field, he was running routes. He didn't get targeted much, but, he's the guy that has that big playability, right? So GPP flyer only. I'm not playing him in cash again, but something to look at for the larger field tournaments, I think.
Pretty soon they'll be giving away Brandon Cooks, right? It'd be like a buy one, get one. Like,
nobody wants him.
Buy one burger, get one free. You got Cooks, pair him with Watson. He's free. Take him. But yeah, interesting call there. You have some serious leverage, and it'd be a super cheap way to put him with Watson. I mean, you could run him as a one-off, but that would be some super leverage there. Yeah, just a strange game. People have been questioning. There might be no hotter seat than Bill O'Brien right now. I can't believe Adam Gase is still coaching, by the way. So I can't see Bill. Yeah, and just to touch on the Minnesota side, Dalvin Cook, monster. Season continues. Usually after guys get paid, they have a bad season, but he is kind of breaking that, I guess, misconception or stereotype. Adam Thielen just kind of took the reins back from Jefferson. 10 targets. He's now averaging 8 targets a game, which is very, very fair. Jefferson had 5 targets. Nice little game himself there. But that's the Minnesota offense, and they're not on the main slate, so we won't spend a ton of time there. But it's Thielen, it's Cook, and it's a little bit of Justin Jefferson. That's it. Like that's the Minnesota offense. And if they could find a play caller that was any bit creative, they would be fun. But it's just so vanilla with Mike Zimmer, and I don't know. That was just a strange game. Minnesota's not on the main slate. So you have any thoughts on them, and we'll just move forward here.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. I mean, it's no different than last year, except subbing Justin Jefferson for Stephon Diggs, and you have the condensed target share, so you at least know where the ball is going within that offense. But like you said, you just don't know if the upside is there from a play calling perspective, from a pace of play perspective. But, I mean, they've definitely shown, right? Thielen has had his big games. Jefferson has had his big games. Cook hasn't had the full breakout yet, but is more than capable. So I think those are the guys that we'll continue to look at in Minnesota, and they'll always be in play for some tournament lineups depending on their matchups. But, yeah, like you said, not on the main slate this week, so don't need to dive too deep into them at the moment.
Let's move on here. We talked a little bit about that Jacksonville Bengals game with Mixon. A lot of bigger spreads this week. You know, you brought up pre-show. Baltimore is going to be a massive favorite against the Bengals, and rightfully so. And it's kind of one of those spots where, like, maybe there's so many good options. We saw Lamar come in at super low ownership against the Redskins. I'm sorry, they're not the Redskins. The Washington football team. He was priced pretty highly at 26 DK points, right? Pretty good day. He's 7,900 now. The Bengals are not good against the run whatsoever. Geno Atkins and Mike Daniels are still out, and that's a pretty underrated big time blow to that defense. And you've seen some success against the Bengals on the ground. Listen, you just can't comfortably play anybody besides Lamar Jackson in that backfield. The snap counts are all over the place. Mark Ingram had how many carries did he have? Less than 10. I mean, they were in a smash spot against the Washington football team, and just an ultra headache. But I could see Lamar having a big day on the ground here. As long as it's not a 35-6 game. I think Lamar is a unique kind of tournament option looking at this week. And it's funny to say that he's flying under the radar as Lamar Jackson, right? But, highest priced quarterback, huge spread. But the problem is, like, what do you do on the other side? Our guy Joe Burrow, speaking of quarterbacks, was first rookie to throw 3 straight 300-yard games now, I think it is. But you want to talk about a free square and a guy who just isn't doing anything is A.J. Green. And I don't know, is the game ever coming? Like, what's up with A.J. Green? He has – 323, 25 total fantasy points this year, I think. 5 targets, 3 yards, 1 catch against the Jaguars. I don't know what's happening with AJ Green, but what if this? Talk to me, TJ. I'll just keep stuttering over here.
I think he's just washed. I mean, I think the same thing that we were saying about Gronk earlier. I think that AJ Green just may not be good anymore, and I'm not really interested in him. I'm much more interested in Tyler Boyd when it comes to the Bengals. Just think that he's getting just as much usage and just as many targets, but just much more explosive player and has actually had the results a bit here. Hasn't been fantastic, but, I mean, 8 catches on 9 targets this week, got into the end zone. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I do think that Lamar is going to go overlooked, as you said, because it's not really a game stack type of situation, just because Baltimore's such a heavy favorite, and it's not one that's going to be as much back and forth as much as it is likely that Baltimore will just beat down on the Bengals a bit here. And I mean, he's also – I mean, it's either Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown that you want to stack with him. So you could run a Lamar Jackson and either Andrews or Brown and run it back with Boyd. Don't think you have to run it back. Also don't think you have to pair Jackson with anyone. I mean, this could be one of those games where he hits the 100-yard rushing bonus and runs 2 or 3 into the end zone. So – and I think the other reason that Lamar is not getting as much traction is because he was – I mean, last year he was like the guy, right? He was kind of head and shoulders above the other quarterbacks. But now we've got Josh Allen and Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson and these Kyler Murray, these other quarterbacks that have also emerged as having these 25, 30-point games on a regular basis. So, and you can get them at much cheaper prices. And they kind of have easier stackability and typically seem to play on teams with worse defenses. So they usually set up better for game stacks. So I guess all of that is to say that Lamar is certainly in play here, but I think he will come at some lower ownership.
Yeah, and he destroys the Bengals. They played last October. He had 152 rushing yards on 19 carries and a touchdown. There's your RB1 for the week, right?
Wow.
Didn't do much through the air. I mean, he had 230 yards, but seriously, anything after that's kind of just a bonus, right? The other game, I'm not a big like history game log hunter in fantasy in football, but the other game against the Bengals, they played in November, 7 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. And wow, the Ravens hung 49 on him that game. And he had 3 touchdowns through the air and 220 yards. So he might be the Bengal slayer, man. That's going to break the slate if he performs, to any kind of degree like that as a quarterback. I mean, he's definitely in play for me. Like you said, like what do you do running it back wise? Tyler Boyd obviously is kind of just taking over that wide receiver 1 role. And even at this point, like what's the market for AJ Green? He has showed nothing. I think maybe since he's just kind of stuck with him at this point. But just to kind of piggyback off of last week's Baltimore game against the Washington football team, Antonio Gibson did a lot of damage, and he was like 1% owned on both sites, and rightfully so. But two of my other takeaways from that are, I can't tell if Dwayne Haskins stinks or Logan Thomas stinks. I think it's more of Dwayne Haskins being pretty bad, because every week Logan Thomas pops somewhere and whatever you're looking at, because he always sees at least 4 targets. He just doesn't do anything. I mean, he's not great at football either, I guess. I'm trying to be polite. Like, I don't want to be too rude. But also, a big positive was, Terry seeing 10 targets. So he's seen double-digit targets in 2 of 4 weeks. And, moving forward, I think that's a good sign. They're going to take on the Rams, who let down a lot of people. So talk to me anything else on that Baltimore game, and we'll move forward and talk about the Washington team and the Rams.
Yeah, I think I'm good on the Baltimore side. As far as Washington goes, I mean, I love Terry. I think that you can play him almost any week because he's good in general. And he's like the only good player on their entire team. So they have to give him the ball. And they're always going to be trailing. So, or in a high scoring game. So they're always going to be throwing the ball. I mean, I think that McLaurin is in play on any given week, either as a part of a run back to whoever's playing Washington, or even just as a one-off. I mean, he just brings a ton of upside to the table, gets a lot of usage, has big playability. So love Terry, and yeah, I'm with you on the Logan Thomas thing. It's like we've been watching and being giddy over the snap numbers and the target numbers, but turns out you don't get any DraftKings points for snaps played. So eventually, it's like you gotta catch the ball, and then after you catch the ball, you have to get some yards, and then maybe even get into the end zone. And, like, he's not even doing the first thing, let alone getting yards or getting into the end zone. So, like, kind of over the Logan Thomas thing. I mean, tight end's been so interesting this year. I mean, the what was his name? Troutman thing?
Oh, boy.
The Troutman thing this week, right?
Yeah.
Some random tight end appears from New Orleans. And
Drew Brees loves his tight ends.
Play him, and then he barely even plays. Like, I might just play Kittle this week so I don't have to deal with tight end.
Just pay up.
Herndon, Logan Thomas, Troutman. Like, I wonder if I've even gotten 10 points from my cash game DraftKings tight ends so far this year. I may not have.
I want to see Alex Smith. I mean, we've seen 25% of the 2020 year with Dwayne Haskins. If anybody in that organization thinks he's the future, I mean, we saw him last year too, then just fire everyone. You're fired. Fire everyone. Terry is the only Washington player with an A.dot over 10, and it's barely over 10. Like the ball's just not getting moved down the field. Whether he's not reading correctly, like not making his reads correctly, which he isn't, and he's not accurate, which is another problem, then I don't know what he's doing, right? Like Logan Thomas A.dot 7.3. Like I get he's a tight end, that's fine. But Terry, I mean, I'm looking at like an Adam Thielen whose A.dot's like 15 or 16 or something like that, right? He's not a burner, but he just gets open. Like the ball, he's able to get Kirk Cousins, former Washington football player, is, and I never give Kirk Cousins kudos, but he's not Dwayne Haskins, right? The ball just isn't getting pushed down the field at all. And I get it. There's not a ton of talent there, but like we need to see more from Dwayne Haskins. And can you roll them out of 16 games of this? Like, I know, but can you? I don't know. I don't want to talk about them anymore. But they're playing the Rams, who let a ton of people down. Right when you start to trust Sean McVay and Darrell Henderson, insert Malcolm Brown. Thanks, Sean McVay. What a mess. It's hard to trust anybody in that backfield with the Rams. Of course, they're going to be in a sweet spot against Washington, right? But, they only hung – they scored 19 against the Giants or 17. They even scored 20 points. So another game where people had a little bit of exposure and just was kind of a letdown, TJ.
Yeah, the Rams are just not a fun team to evaluate from a fantasy standpoint because you never know who's going to be McVay's flavor of the week. Like you said, get excited for Darrell Henderson to get some run here. Malcolm Brown outsnaps him 60-40 percentage-wise. Seems like every single week, you never know between Kupp, Woods, Higbee, who's going to get the targets, who's going to get the catches. It's typically pretty spread out across the board with them, so you're just kind of playing touchdown roulette on which of them is going to get into the end zone. So, yeah, it's just like I don't know that I see a Ram stack like winning GPPs at any point. It just, especially with some of these other high-powered offenses that have the much more condensed market shares, I just don't know that any of those individuals bring enough upside to the table in themselves because they're spreading the ball and the snaps around so much. So, I mean, really, overall, this LA-Washington game for me is mostly an avoid. Maybe some Terry one-offs like we talked about, but I'm not really interested in loading up on the Rams here. I just think that there's too many mouths to feed.
Yeah, good point. Let's get to some of these fun games. Save the best for last. We have 15, 20 minutes here on the pod. And the first one that strikes me is our guys, the Panthers, the GPP run back kings, right? So Carolina, it looks like McCaffrey is not going to play as early in the week, but got Atlanta 3.5-point faves over Carolina, 54.5-point total as of right now. Matt Ryan's cheap. I guess what's your first take on this one?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great game to look at from a stacking perspective. I think it's not the highest total on the board, but all the other high totals are like the Chiefs and the Ravens being 13-point favorites. So this one, 54.5-point total, and Atlanta's at a 3.5-point favorite. So I think that brings the most shootout potential to the table. And yeah, I mean, Mike Davis has really kind of stepped in and become that Christian McCaffrey light in some ways, seeing, he's not seeing 100% of the snaps like McCaffrey was, but he's seeing 70-75% of snaps. He's getting targeted in the passing game, had 6 targets this past week, got himself into the end zone. So I think that you could look to Davis again for this final week, assuming that McCaffrey comes back afterwards. DJ Moore was a pretty chalky play. Didn't really produce much. I mean, he had 7 targets, but didn't really do a ton with them. Only ended up getting 4 catches for 49 yards. I mean, that's not going to do it a ton. And someone who continues to perform the best and he's even seeing the most targets is Robbie Anderson.
Yeah,
actually, I wrote him in my GPP article last week because I liked. Everyone was talking about DJ Moore, so I thought, and they were pretty much the same price. So I thought that was a nice pivot off of his teammate, and he's shown in the past that he's got crazy upside, right? Like he's one of those guys that can at any given point just randomly get a 70-yard touchdown. He did it earlier this week, and he got 11 targets last week, and has been he's got 35 targets for their team, and Moore's got 32. So they're pretty much neck and neck, but Robbie Anderson has, for whatever reason, been producing more. And yeah.
Stealing my thunder, but I love it. I'm on the same page with you there. Robbie Anderson, the burner. Bridgewater found his guy. Mike Davis averaging over 7 targets a game, by the way, last 3 weeks he's played. But Curtis Samuel, just not really, GPP candidate every week. Just hasn't really, the boom game hasn't happened. But, and by the way, if Teddy Bridgewater is going to do the damn thing, it's going to be this week. Atlanta, short week, probably going to, we're recording early Monday, probably going to be a dogfight in the frozen tundra up there in Lambeau. Quarterbacks with rushing upside. Teddy Bridgewater, did you see him looking like 04 Michael Vick? Did you see that? 32 yards and a tutty. We're talking the same week where we saw Sam Darnold go to the house in prime time. My buddy's like, I'm betting Matt Ryan to score first touchdown tonight. I'm like, if he scores a touchdown, I'll Venmo you $20. If he's the first touchdown of the game, like, go for it, man. I like burning money, but I like making money a little more. But seriously, what a game from Teddy. 27 DK points. That's like ceiling Teddy, right? Threw the ball 37 times. And they came out on top against Arizona. So he's in another interesting spot. Listen, I'm never like a Teddy Bridgewater advocate, but if you're gonna kind of punt or pay down, it's this game. It's Matt Ryan and Bridgewater, right? Like I love that Atlanta's on a short week too, for sure. That definitely. And they're going home, and that's cool. Good for them. But this low key is probably my favorite game right here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Ryan and Bridgewater are both pretty good pay down quarterback options. And obviously we're recording on Monday, so we haven't watched the Monday night game yet, but 6,800 Julio Jones is pretty cheap for Julio Jones. I understand he had a tough week in week 2 and was injured in week 3, but I mean, he had 27 DraftKings points the first week, and who knows what he could do tonight. I mean, I think if he has a big Monday night game, 6,800 Julio Jones could be the chalk. I mean, he's now 700 cheaper than Ridley, which is kind of nuts. I mean, Ridley's been smashing it, don't get me wrong, and I love Ridley too. But 7,500 for Ridley versus 6,800 for Julio, I think people will start to gravitate to Julio. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is from the Atlanta side, right? I'm still not interested in Todd Gurley. I just don't think that the snap count and the touches are there. Russell Gage continues to be an interesting option. So, and Hurst, I mean,
doesn't see the volume from Matt Ryan,
he just doesn't get the volume. Like, maybe he gets a touchdown, but he doesn't seem like he's going to get you the, 8 catches for 100 yards in a touchdown game. Like, maybe he'll get you 3 catches for 50 in a touchdown. He's going to get you 12 points. But I don't see Hurst going off for 25 points ever. So it's really Julio, obviously Ridley, and Russell Gage. Pair them up with Matt Ryan or run them back with Bridgewater stacks. But definitely think there's going to be a lot of ways to go with this game, and it's not going to cost you a whole lot. So then you can pay up for the Zekes or whatever you want to do from the other side.
The thing about Atlanta is they just don't throw the ball to their backs. Todd Gurley had 5 targets week 1, and he's had a combined 2 targets in weeks 2 and 3. Brian Hill hasn't seen more than 3 targets. Ito Smith hasn't seen more than 3 targets. So, where the ball's going at least, right? We know where the shares are going. It's going to those 3 receivers. For some reason, he just doesn't throw the ball to Hayden Hurst after Austin Hooper was his guy, right, for how long. But, yeah, that's a huge game. Another game that'll be fun, which we haven't seen the outcome from this week's game, is Kansas City 12-point favorites against the Raiders. And, I mean, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this because – the Chiefs are in play every week, especially as pretty significant favorites against Oakland. Derek Carr's looked okay this year, right? He's shown flashes. I'm just not a believer, right? So I know it's a high total, but I don't even mind taking some stabs at taking Clyde Edwards and maybe the KCD. I don't know. Could be a weird game. Chiefs off a short week too, right? Darren Waller, if you're going anywhere, it's probably him or Renfro from the slot. It just seems like Darren Waller's his guy. I think he's on pace for 160-some targets or something crazy, right, out of your tight end. But, obviously, if you're going to run something back there, it's not Josh Jacobs for me. I know you can run the ball on KC, but I just looking ahead, I don't see that game script being a thing where it's like a Jacobs game. So, obviously, all the Chiefs are in play, What are your thoughts on that one? I mean, you can say a million different things about who's going to get the ball in that game, but every slate, right? Mahomes in play.
Yeah, it's always the same. I mean, they're just good, right? And they have Mahomes, so you have Mahomes, anyone can be good. Maybe Logan Thomas would even catch a ball with Mahomes. But I mean, I think Edwards-Helaire at 6,800 is likely to be a very chalky play. That's my gut. Again, we haven't seen the results from Monday night, which recency bias always plays in a big factor here. But yeah, it's Edwards-Helaire. I think tight end is interesting because you have Kelsey and Kittle at pretty much the same price. And so after having neither of them on the main slate last week, we now have both of them on the main slate here. You also mentioned Waller. He would definitely be my preferred option from the Las Vegas side of things. So if you want to get real crafty, you could go like Mahomes, Edwards-Helaire, Kelsey, and then Waller in the flex with a double tight end lineup. I think that gives you a little bit of a unique look because not a lot of people are going with the double tight end, especially paying up for two tight ends. So that's one thought. If not in a main build, obviously, but if you're getting a little bit tricky with your stacks, I think that's one way to go. But yeah, for the most part, it's just play any chief you want, play them as a stack, play them as any of them as a one-off, and yeah, any of them can go off.
I know our guy Jordan has the hashtag, play whoever you want, but maybe we should get our own, play any chief you want, right?
Yeah,
just throw it in there.
Anytime. Never a bad play.
And usually, a lot of DFSers love to punt tight end, right? They just love to do it. But now it's like, where do we go? Everybody's kind of getting up there, at least above 4K. Do you want to go back to Logan Thomas? Other than that, you got like Jack Doyle's of the world who haven't done anything yet. Chris Herndon, well, maybe we'll never get that game out of Chris Herndon, right? Like, who do you punt? I don't know. I think we're going to start seeing people pay up more. I think towards the end of the season, we're seeing tight ends really, really make a staple in a lot of these offenses. Even Schultz is 4,800 now for Dallas. And, I'll let you take the floor in a second here, and we can kind of work our way into that the Dallas Giants game, to start to wrap things up. But, if I'm looking in that mid-range, Evan Ingram, 10 targets last week, they've just been a train wreck, right? 6 catches for 35 yards. But if I'm going to pay down anywhere, it might be him, especially if you're kind of, thinking the Giants might play from behind kind of thing. But they've just been brutal. So talk to me. Dallas was in a lot of league-winning lineups last week, tournament-winning lineups. They keep throwing the ball a ton. Maybe we finally get the Zeke game and a decent game script. And Zeke hasn't lit up the world, but they've been throwing the ball a ton. He's seen 3 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets. I'm sorry. Those were his catches. He's seen 4 targets, 7 targets, 11 targets, 8 targets. So even when they're playing from behind, he's been able to put up. He's been over 20 DK points 3 out of 4 games this year so far. So maybe he'll finally get in a rhythm, pound the ball, still get involved through the air. So this is one of those games with a pretty big spread where I'm sure there'll be a lot of ownership. What do you think, TJ?
Yeah, I think Zeke, 7,800 on DraftKings, he's going to be the premier play this week. He just has by far the highest floor of any of the other players that you could go to on the entire slate. I would say similar to what Kamara was this past week, where he was in some of the higher stakes, he was 60% owned in tournaments, 70% owned in tournaments. Kamara, I don't know if Zeke will get to that level, but I think that 7,800 is still too cheap for the role that he has. Like you said, game script independent. Even if they go behind, he'll still be in there catching balls. But it's got to be time that I just don't see the Giants putting up points without Saquon. They just have not a ton going on there. So I think that this is actually an interesting week to maybe go with Zeke and maybe take a little bit of a stand on fading the Dallas passing game, which is going to be scary. Don't get me wrong. And you still are going to want some exposure there. Amari Cooper has been on an absolute tear. 15 targets last week.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's really coming into that elite wide receiver one that we always thought that maybe he could be. Seems like that is a thing now for sure. You mentioned Schultz. Schultz is becoming a thing too, but like you just said, he's now 4,800. Come on. if I can pay 6,400 to get Kelsey, like I don't really want to pay 4,800 for Schultz. So yeah, and then Lamb, Gallup. To me, the Dallas passing game is I think Cooper's establishing himself as the clear number one, and then like one of Lamb or Gallup can also have a big game any given week, and then Zeke's always going to have a solid. So they're becoming like the Chiefs, where it's just like, hey, play any Cowboy you want. They're all in the mix here.
CD Lamb's snaps were back up, so I'm sure people were happy about that. And I know Mike McCarthy's the coach now, but does he want Dak throwing the ball this much? Like, is Cooper that elite guy, or is it partially volume based? Yeah. Like, Dak threw the ball 39 times week 1, which we thought was a lot for Dak, right? Oh, week 2, 47. Wow, that's a lot for Dak. Week 3 against Seattle, 57. Whoa, there's no way he can throw more, right? 58 attempts against Cleveland. Come on.
There's no way they want to do that, right? So, I mean, that's why I think I'll probably seriously consider, trying to take a stand this week and going massively overweight on Zeke in my lineups and maybe fading the Dak stacks. Maybe mix in 1 or 2 just to have it, but
I'm with you.
I think that could be the play, and then get some exposure to some of these other kind of cheaper game stacks that we have, which then allows you to also get Zeke into a lineup. That's at least, again, early here, but I feel like that's a pretty good way to go about some of your builds this week.
Agreed. And they could still – and that could still be a good play, the Dallas passing game. It could be. But if you're expecting, these 30-point upside out of these guys, at home against the Giants, if they get that crazy I'm trailing by a million game script against this Giants team, I don't know. I'll have to seriously –
happening, right?
I don't know, right?
Yeah, and then it's like, if I'm going to run a Dak, Cooper, CD Lamb lineup, I'm going to want to have a run back, but there's nobody on the Giants that I really want to play.
Right. For me, it's Ingram. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And I don't even want to play him, but I don't. If I fall on Ingram, I'll be okay with it. But
agreed.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the Zeke call. I'm curious to see what his ownership projections are. Check out RotoGrinders ownership projections throughout the week. Top of the line stuff here. Shout out to Chris Jimino. Great work and our projection team at RG. But I like that game script. I like that call. Got a couple minutes left here. That's about it. We don't know if the Bills and Titans are going to play. So far, so good. Your boy Josh Allen might be the league's MVP. I'm a Titans fan. I'm unbiased. They have a ton of COVID positive guys who are significant. Jeffrey Simmons, right? Christian Fulton, who's been filling in to help chip away with Adoree Jackson's absence, who still might be out, right? This secondary could be depleted. The Titans might not have their best defensive lineman, who's a monster. And Adam Humphries has COVID. We just don't even know who's going to play yet, if the game's even going to happen. But if this game happens, the Titans are so out of whack. I am so sad as a fan. But how do you not like some of the Bills with a team who has just been in a situation no one else has ever been in NFL history? You have to consider some Bills this week. If this game's going to play and some of these guys are going to be out, the Titans are going to be in a world of hurt, I think. And that's coming from a fan. I'm just trying to be who knows? If Vrabel wins this game, this will probably be the biggest win in his tenure. And they've had some pretty big wins, right? Last year, ran through New England, got the win, beat Baltimore. But if they somehow overcome COVID-19 and the league's MVP, Josh Allen, I don't know. I'm just saying. I'll give you the floor on Josh Allen. He looked great, man. He did.
Yeah, I mean, he's really looking like a true MVP candidate out there. And he's spreading the ball around too. I mean, he's just playing good, solid football, getting it done through the air, getting it done on the ground when he needs to, but not as his primary go-to, which I think is a good thing, right? He's kind of settling into a pass-first guy that has that threat as a run and is just kind of a beast when we get down into the red zone. I mean, I think that's when he's most dangerous. He's dropping back from the 5-yard line. It's such a difficult play to stop because leave someone open, he's going to find them. Leave him open, he'll just run it right in on you. So love Josh Allen. I'll continue to have a Josh Allen GPP lineup pretty much every week here. I think you can always pair him with either Diggs or John Brown. I don't think I would ever double stack with Josh Allen, just because similar to Lamar, a lot of it comes from his option on the ground, which he hasn't really even been running for many yards, but he's just getting rushing touchdowns, it seems like, once a week. So Josh Allen looks great. And, yeah, I think it'll be a very interesting spot to monitor what's going on with the Titans over the next couple of days here. So definitely something that we want to keep an eye on there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We got to wrap things up here momentarily. We didn't talk about Broncos Patriots. We're still waiting on the Patriots game tonight. Plus, we don't really know the status of Cam Newton. So that'll be something to monitor. They play at 4:25 next week. Stick with RotoGrinders all week, and we'll have you covered on everything that's happening around the league. The other game I wanted to quickly talk about before we get out of here is Cardinals-Jets. Cardinals coming across. Actually, they probably didn't leave the East Coast. They went to Carolina, took an L. They'll take on the Fighting Adam Gases this week. And 6.5-point favorites. I guess a little low of a game total than I maybe expected here. It could be kind of sneaky to go back to some of these Cardinals maybe this week. Kenyon Drake let everyone down again. If he was going to smash, everyone kind of thought it would be last week. I know he exited the game pretty late. But, yeah, Cardinals-Jets, before we get out of here, TJ, got anything for me?
Yeah, Drake just for whatever reason, just not getting it done. I mean, he's losing some snaps to Chase Edmonds and just not doing a ton with the touches that he is getting. Not really seeing much of any work in the passing game. It seems like if they get into a situation where they need to pass the ball, that's when Chase Edmonds comes into the game. So I did, unfortunately, write up Drake in my GPP article last week because I thought it was a good spot, but I may be done with him at this point. I did see one interesting thing on the Jets. This Jeff Smith, 10 targets and played like every snap. I don't even really know much about him, but and it doesn't even mean I'm interested in him. I just thought that kind of came out of nowhere a bit. So Jeff Smith, like I said, had 7 catches on 10 targets, played 90+% of the snaps for the Jets. I'm assuming that he's like near min price.
He won a lot of people a lot of money last showdown. Not a lot of people. He won a few people a lot of money during last week's showdown. Yeah. We'll have to see what's up with Sam Darnold throughout the week. He did finish that game. Looks like he had a shoulder problem. Ton of targets there, right? And the run game was
minimum price, $3,000 on draft.
Oh, boy, he'll be interesting.
So that's an interesting one. I mean, I literally don't really know anything about him. Like, what did he do the other weeks?
He got activated off the practice squad, I believe.
Activated.
And Sam Darnold's like, this is my guy. I'm just going to feed him. This is my guy.
So, I mean,
everything's fine.
An interesting one.
Right. Everything's fine. Jameson Crowder came back, wasn't 100%, saw 10 targets. So he's played 2 games this year and is averaging 11.5 targets too. So that could, one of those guys could be a very interesting run back or even just a one-off, right? If you think the volume's going to go there. This run game just isn't going with Frank Gore and Kalen Ballage and Michael P. Ryan. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? So the Jets are going to be between a rock and a hard place. But, yeah, definitely interesting punt there. Jameson Crowder in play, I think, just off of sheer volume, and the run game is non-existent, so they're going to have to throw the ball. But, yeah, like on the flip side, we didn't get a monster game from Hopkins and Murray, 7,200 against the Jets, who are the laughingstock of the league. I think, you might be able to get some ownership on the Cardinals. If people are going up to Zeke and if there's other places they're paying up, I mean, I think it's interesting. If people are going to pay for the Ridleys or go with the Chiefs, you might be able to get some ownership on D-Hop and Kyler Murray. So that's it. Anything else before we close up shop here, TJ?
No, not a ton else. I'll have my article coming out later this week. You can follow me on Twitter at TJL5124DFS. And yeah, well, I think we have a much different week setting up here where we have, last week was kind of the week of the shootouts with a ton of high total, closer spread games. This week, it seems like there's a lot more lopsided spreads where we expect to have game scripts where one team will be ahead. So That's the beauty of NFL DFS. Gives us a completely different look every single week. We've got buys starting to come into play now. There's only 2 this week, but those will continue to obviously increase over the next couple of weeks, and should be fun. Let's go out there and win some tournaments.
Bye weeks, and who only knows with the pandemic, right? Like, I unfortunately don't think this is the end of it. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see.
It'll be an adventure, I think, every week to figure out what's going on from that perspective.
Couldn't agree more. Check TJ out on Twitter. Get any questions, hit us up. You can find me at the J Carlucci on Twitter. I'll be on Thursday Night Showdown. I'll be with Dean, the Almanac. We'll be subbing in for Tambo, so we'll talk about the Bucks and Bears. Get on over there to RotoGrinders, guys. We got the best stuff in the industry. Thanks for listening. Give us a like. Give us some feedback. Let us know what you want to hear. For TJ Laessig, I'm Justin Carlucci. We'll catch you next week. Good luck.